Well, joining me now is Vivek Ramaswamy, Strive co-founder and executive chairman and author of Nation of Victims. Vivek, great to see you. A lot to talk about here. Let's get right to it with the latest findings on the Trump ban from Twitter. This has been fascinating to me. You look at the internal conversation. I think the honest brokers are saying there's no reason to do this policy-wise, and yet some in Twitter were saying we must do it. Your reaction to all of it?
So I think it raises a new basis for legal liability at Twitter, which is consumer fraud. The definition of consumer fraud is telling consumers you are going to do one thing when in fact you are doing the opposite. What did they tell the public? That they were just following the terms of service, that there was no political discrimination, let alone even any viewpoint-based discrimination on the basis of shadow banning, when in fact those are exactly the things that this company was carrying out. So I think it just adds one more layer to the plot of legal liabilities. I still think the biggest issue in this whole thing is the state coordination, the governmental pressure, the number of people in Washington, D.C., in legislative positions of power who threatened the company with retribution if they did not remove accounts like that of Donald Trump. But I think this just layers on to that legal case and really reveals the essence of a company that wasn't following any policy or procedure, but was really just shooting from the hip, and a hip that was indeed politically biased.
Yeah, if you look at a tweet from Michael Schellenberger, who's sharing some of the latest tranche here, let's put that tweet up on the screen. It's fascinating what he's talking about there, because what he's saying is creates justifications to ban Trump, seek a change of policy for Trump alone. This is so fascinating, Vivek. Seek a policy for Trump alone, distinct from other political leaders. Now, layer that, as you just said, on top of the talk about the FBI tipping off Twitter to the Hunter Biden laptop. This looks to me very coordinated, Vivek, but we haven't gotten, it seems, the smoking gun on that yet. Do you see that coming in one of these later tranches?
Yeah, the only area where I disagree with you is that we have already seen it long before these batches of files were released. Legislative pressure, threats directly issued to the company that we're going to break you up, we're going to regulate you, we're going to revoke you of Section 230 status unless you take down hate speech or misinformation. We've already seen reports earlier this year that the White House specifically met, the Biden White House did, with officials of Twitter to target specific critics of the U.S. government by name, targeting them for censorship. Internal correspondences between employees of Twitter who felt that pressure and then removed those individuals like Alex Berenson who are critics of the government. And to me, I think these files just validate that pattern of behavior. So in a certain sense, this is the cherry on top. We already knew all along that there was deep governmental pressure all the way down. And I think that is the number one issue. If it is state action in disguise, then the Constitution still applies. If companies are going to do the dirty work of government, they ought to be bound by the same standards as the U.S. government. That includes the First Amendment.
Jack Dorsey getting pulled into this. You know, he's been before Congress, and he said, we're not shadow banning. No chance that we're doing that. Well, obviously, that's not the case. Do you think he personally is going to land in some legal hot water as a result of what we're learning based on what he said on the record?
I think it's more the company as a whole. At the end of the day, Jack Dorsey it's debatable. The extent to which he did or didn't know, those facts change on a day-to-day basis. My basic read of the situation, though, is that this was the managerial class running the show. Just as it's true in government, it turns out it's true in the big parts of the private sector as well. It is a managerial bureaucracy that I think pushed further and further a founder who had a vision for a free and open internet to quickly abandon that vision all the way to taking vacations on the other side of the Pacific and ultimately getting checked out when, in fact, the bureaucrats ultimately wielded power. And I think that bureaucracy carved the channels through which ideology flows. And I think that's true in big government as it is in big business today.
So Republicans take over Congress next year. What do you want to see them do on the investigation front when it comes to this?
Well, I think that the number one thing to do is not just to create a show. It is actually to deliver substance. I think Section 230C2 needs to be amended. That is different from C1. That's the part that says that platforms aren't liable for what users post. Let's put that to one side. Section C2 says that these companies are immune from state liability if they remove content that is otherwise constitutionally protected. I think we need to make that an opt-in statute. If you want the protections, great, you can have them. But if the federal government is going to protect you with a cloak of immunity, then you have to abide by the same constraints as the federal government itself. And yes, that includes the Constitution and the First Amendment to that Constitution. I think it is a simple thing that a Republican Congress can deliver. And you know what? I think that a lot of forward-thinking Democrats are going to realize that this same shoe could fit the other foot a decade or two from now, and I think it could be unifying to deliver that kind of reform.
So let's stay on Congress for a second. Sam Bankman-Fried is going to testify before Congress. He said a lot since this whole meltdown happened, but so much of it has seemed to be, well, is he telling the truth? Is he telling the whole story? Do you think that's going to change when he testifies, Vivek, or are we going to get more of the same here?
He's a master of deflection. First, the do-good, ESG-friendly smokescreen, that kind of deflection. Then the kind of deflection of calling for responsible regulation of the cryptocurrency industry. Now he's a master of deflection with bureaucratic techno-jargon. But I will say this. It's going to be easy for those people in Congress to have camera moments and beat up on SBF. That's the easy part. I think the harder part is actually for everyone to look deeply in the mirror and realize that he is not so different than a lot of financial elites who came before him in the 2008 era, in the post-2008 era. I mean, if you take a look at what happened with MF Global, that was run by John Corzine, who was a former executive at Goldman Sachs, former governor of New Jersey, very friendly to the Democratic Party. Where was the accountability there? It was a total of a $5 million fine for the exact same issues like misappropriation of customer funds as we see with FTX here. And so, in a certain sense, I think going after SBF is the easy part in some ways for camera moments. We need to actually understand how he is just a symptom of a deeper culture of lack of accountability for people who commit that form of outright fraud. It's happened before, and I'm afraid to say it's going to keep happening again unless we see past those do-good virtue signaling smoke screens.
Well, while he was virtue signaling, he was trying to buy a lot of influence on Capitol Hill. We'll see how that affects these hearings. We got to leave it there, Vivek. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.